family feud, accusations of wife's cheating and me-ills destroy marriage. During pregnancy, my mother-in-law accused me of cheating because we are having a girl, then physically attacked me. Here's what happened. My mother-in-law, Linda, is in her late 70s. She and my father-in-law, George, had my husband Daniel later in life as a final attempt to have a child. Daniel is named Daniel Thomas Smith, 5, as the name has been passed down for generations. There hasn't been a girl born on his side of the family in over a century, and there's a running joke that the men in his family can't produce daughters. Fast forward to our wedding day, and I had a pretty good relationship with Linda up until this point. The wedding was wonderful, beautiful ceremony, entertaining speeches. Everything was perfect until the end of the night. We were getting ready to leave for our honeymoon suite when Linda looked me dead in the eye and said, "Now go make us our Daniel Thomas Smith 5. I nervously laughed and we departed. Well, as fate would have it, I did conceive a beautiful baby with my husband during our honeymoon, and it turned out to be a girl. Everyone was shocked when we announced it was a girl, and most of the family denied it up until the moment she was born. That's when the awful comments started. Whenever Daniel wasn't around, Linda and her family members would make snide remarks like, "I wonder where she got that nose." It's definitely not Daniel's. For the record, my baby, as beautiful as she is, looks strikingly like Daniel. She genuinely resembles him more and more as the first year has gone by, and even more so as we approach her second birthday. Well, as it would happen, we are now expecting our second baby, and yes, it's another girl. I begged Daniel not to tell Linda the gender when we found out, as I just wanted to enjoy a bit more of this pregnancy before she ruined it. I had decided to keep the mean comments Linda made to me about our first daughter to myself, as she's old and in poor health, and I felt guilty about potentially ruining their relationship when she probably doesn't have many years left. I should mention that Linda isn't dying or anything. She's just been in extremely poor health her whole life. She smokes over a pack of cigarettes a day, eats junk food, constantly drinks only cola, refuses to exercise, etc. I once offered this woman water after she almost passed out from walking 15 steps, and she gagged and said, "That's disgusting. Water makes me nauseous. Get me my soda." So anyway, Daniel insists on announcing it at our next visit, and holy moly, y'all, as soon as she heard it was another girl, tears welled in her eyes and she started shaking her head and sobbing. She then started yelling at me, calling me a cheater, and demanded I get out of her house. Daniel immediately stood up and started yelling at her, asking what her problem was, and that she needed to apologize to me and watch her language in front of her grandchildren. She said through broken wails, "Not ours, not ours. Those girls are not ours. She's a cheater. My son did not father those daughters." I started crying hysterically and picked up my daughter, who was utterly confused as to why her daddy was yelling at her grandma, and her mummy was now crying. Linda then looked at me and started yelling, "I let you get away with it. The first time I took you and your family in, I allowed my son to believe he fathered that brat, but I will not allow it again." Daniel was now beyond furious. One thing I should mention here is that while Daniel had prepared his whole life for having a son, he was thrown for a loop when our daughter was born. He never knew that he could love any girl in the world as much as he loves our daughter. He has made several comments about how she is the best thing that ever happened to him. I started crying hysterically and picked up my daughter, who was utterly confused as to why her daddy was yelling at her. Grandma and her mummy was now crying. Linda then looked at me and started yelling, "I let you get away with it. The first time I took you and your family in, I allowed my son to believe he fathered that brat, but I will not allow it again." Daniel was now beyond furious. One thing I should mention here is that while Daniel had prepared his whole life for having a son, he was thrown for a loop when our daughter was born. He never knew that he could love any girl in the world as much as he loves our daughter. He has made several comments about how she is the best thing that ever happened to him over the past year and a half. Daniel has often said that he never understood the depth of love until he held our baby girl. I can confidently say that if he had to choose between saving me, our daughter, or his mother, he would choose our daughter without a second thought. His anger reached a boiling point, and he began shouting at Linda, telling her she was completely out of line and had no right to insult his daughter. He then declared that we were leaving and that until she came to her senses, she would not see any of us again. She attempted to speak further, but he cut her off, exclaiming, "By the way, my mum, I love that little girl more than I ever loved you." As he was leading us out the door, I broke down in tears and told Daniel about all the hurtful comments she and her family had made to me when he wasn't around during the 2-hour drive home. He was livid with them all, but provided incredible comfort and support to me. We went no contact for several months, and life seemed to improve. We blocked Linda and George's phone numbers, and only heard about them through other relatives on Facebook. We told these relatives to either refrain from relaying messages from Linda or face being blocked themselves. As my due date neared, we decided to take the high road and reached out to Linda and George, offering them a chance to make amends. Linda incessantly complained about missing Daniel and her granddaughter. We agreed to meet for dinner at their house after a few weeks, expecting a sincere apology from her. We arranged for my sister to babysit our daughter to keep her away from the tension. When dinner was served and we attempted to make small talk, then Daniel addressed the elephant in the room. "Yeah, Mum, this has all been nice, but we need to talk about what happened and the things you said last time we were here." "I know, and you know that you owe my wife an apology." Linda then looked at Daniel and said, "Yes, do you have the test?" Daniel, puzzled, asked what test. Linda replied, "The paternity test. I'm not apologizing until I'm proven wrong, and we both know I'm right. You cannot be the father, and the fact that you have now supposedly made 2 girls is absurd." Daniel, in disbelief, asked, "What is wrong with you?" I started to cry and stood up to gather my things and head to the car. "Oh no, you don't," and jumped up rounding the table to grab my shirt. "How dare you try to run away from this? You're a liar and you need to own up to this problem." Daniel shouted at her to get her hands off me and started to move toward us. She then decided that I could not be allowed to leave with her son, so she slapped me as hard as she could across the face. I pushed her arm away from me and let out a scream from the shock of being hit. Daniel stepped between me and his mum, yelling at her. He told George to call the police immediately. George ignored him and tried to calm Linda down, insisting that they could handle this privately. Daniel was furious and I was sobbing uncontrollably. He grabbed my hand and we were making our way to the door when Linda grabbed a snow globe from a shelf and hurled it at me, hitting me in the back of the head. It didn't shatter, but it did cut my head open. I collapsed to my knees from the pain, and before Daniel could process what had happened, Linda was grabbing anything she could find to throw in my direction. I was on my knees on the ground, holding my head with one hand and my belly with the other, being almost 9 months pregnant as a barrage of random items flew at me. Daniel was screaming at the top of his lungs for her to stop, and she attempted to get close enough to kick me as hard as she could. Thankfully, her age and poor health prevented her from doing much more damage. Linda quickly lost her momentum, and as a last resort, Daniel shoved his mum, causing her to stumble into a shelf by the front door. He then hurried me out while I cried, panicked, and repeatedly yelled that she kicked my stomach. He drove me to the hospital, where I received 6 stitches in my head and was monitored for 4 days because of the kicks to my abdomen. Thankfully, the baby was unharmed, but the hospital required us to file a police report. We later discovered that when Daniel pushed Linda into the shelf, she broke 2 fingers and is now claiming that the excessive force severely injured her neck. George called an ambulance for her, and she alleged that Daniel and I attacked her at the doorway after they refused us entry for dinner. The police arrived, took our statements, and compared them with the report we filed at the hospital. They informed us that Linda is pressing charges against Daniel for assault, while we are pressing charges against her for attacking me. Daniel was briefly arrested, but released quickly after George was forced to tell the truth, resulting in Linda's arrest for assaulting me. George is now pleading with us to drop the charges, insisting that no one was seriously hurt. I beg to differ. I was injured, and our baby was at risk. He argues that we should drop the charges, claim it was a misunderstanding, and put Linda in counselling. However, because my injuries were documented at the hospital, we can't drop the charges even if we wanted to, as it was filed through the hospital and cannot simply be dismissed. We are currently at home awaiting the arrival of our 2nd child. I am on strict bed rest, and Daniel has taken time off work to care for me and our daughter. I suggested to Daniel that once our second child is born, we should get paternity tests for both girls and send them to his mum in jail as a final gotcha. He found the idea amusing and proposed that we also send copies to all the relatives who supported his mum's delusions, along with a letter saying goodbye and informing them that they will never see us or our daughters again. He wants them to know they have destroyed any chance of having a relationship with him or our children. We are incredibly grateful that our daughter is safe and relieved that we decided not to bring her to their house that night. We can't imagine what could have happened if she had been hit by something. My due date is in 8 days, and I have an appointment that day to discuss induction if the baby hasn't arrived by then. Our first daughter was a week overdue, and I had to be induced last time. Any support for us is greatly appreciated. I will update if any more drama unfolds. Edit. Wow, I never anticipated this would get so much attention and so many responses that the comments are now full. I've read most of your messages and want to thank you all for the kind words and support. I wish I could respond to each of you individually, to those who had similar experiences and whose families were rilled after having a girl following several generations of boys. I'm happy for you, and it reassures me that many families are loving and supportive. It warms my heart. Thank you so much, kind strangers, for the awards. I can't express my gratitude enough. George is arranging Linda's bail this morning. Linda is going to be released from holding soon, but we are proceeding with filing a restraining order and a no-contact order. In my state, these require 2 separate filings. We will receive a court date within a few weeks, giving us time to prepare. Daniel spoke with an attorney this morning who suggested that we file for a paternity test through the court. It would be much cheaper this way, and there wouldn't be any questions about its authenticity. The results would not be presented until they are used as evidence for the case. Daniel has been incredible, offering unwavering support and protection from me and our daughters. However, I can tell he is struggling with the possibility of his mother serving a jail sentence. I feel terrible that this situation has escalated to this point. I wonder if getting a paternity test for our first daughter when the nasty comments started could have prevented all this. Daniel reassures me that I'm being too hard on myself, insisting that none of this is my fault and that Linda would have caused problems regardless. Now it's just a matter of waiting for the baby to arrive, waiting for confirmation of the restraining order and no contact order, waiting for the court date, and waiting to see how much the hospital bill will be. Daniel is out right now with our first daughter, getting me breakfast and some snacks. I can't express how much I love this man and the family we have created. Family is what you make it. You don't have to settle for disrespect or seek approval. Daniel has shown me how much he truly loves and believes in me, even at a great cost. I feel awful that he now sees his mother as a despicable stranger, and I hope that our daughters and I can help fill this new void in his life. I will update in a few weeks once our new baby is here and the court matters are resolved. Thank you all again for providing this platform for support. Update: this is where things take a turn for the worse. We are home now and Daniel has been a rock, very supportive and comforting throughout this ordeal. We went no contact with Linda and George, and I genuinely believed he was on my side. I had suggested doing paternity tests for our girls and sending the results to Linda to get back at her, and it seemed like a great idea. We consulted with a lawyer who recommended taking the paternity tests through the court so the results could be used as uncontested evidence. However, over the next few days, Daniel became increasingly depressed. He began trying to get me to consider minimizing Linda's actions, attributing her behavior to old age. While the first recognized that she is older, she is quite sound-minded. I told him that she will undergo full mental health screenings when we go to court. While age might play a role, it doesn't excuse her assaulting me and making terrible accusations. If she is found to have mental issues, I can accept that, but it doesn't mean I want to be around her or have her near our children. As my induction day approached, because baby girl wasn't making her entrance, I found out that Daniel had been talking with George and Linda behind my back. We had a huge argument, and he admitted that he still wants his mum to meet her granddaughter. He suggested putting the legal issues on hold until after the baby is born, and Linda gets to meet her. I was devastated, crying as I realized he might not be as committed to protecting us from his mother as I thought. I believed he was standing by me through all of this, but in reality, he gave in to his mother in less than 4 days. I reminded him that we had filed for a restraining order and a no-contact order, and by reaching out to them he was violating those terms. His response was, "Well, the no-contact order is for you, not me, and the restraining order hasn't been approved yet, so Mum can meet baby girl number 2 before it's finalized without breaking any rules." All I could do was shake my head and cry. I firmly told him absolutely not. I couldn't believe he would consider letting his mum near me or the baby after what she did. He accused me of overreacting since the baby wasn't injured, and claimed she wasn't trying to hurt the baby, just me. I was shocked. She kicked my heavily pregnant belly repeatedly after hurling a snow globe at my head. We had a massive argument about my unwillingness to forgive her, holding on to grudges, and being unreasonable. Eventually he stormed out. Where did he go? To his mum's house a few hours away. He later called me sobbing, saying that if I could see his mum now, I'd understand. Apparently, when he pushed her during the assault, he broke 2 of her fingers and she sprained her neck when she fell into the shelf. Now she's laid up on a sofa, unable to walk, and in severe depression. He told me I should feel guilty and at the very least let her meet her new grandchild before deciding what to do next. I was furious because not only had he gone to his mum's house, but he also left me alone with our 2-year-old daughter, while I was supposed to be on bed rest with stitches in my head and an overdue baby in my womb. I was beyond exhausted. He didn't return for 4 days until it was time to check into the hospital for my scheduled induction. My sister came to care for our older daughter, and Daniel took me to the hospital. Once there, they began the induction process, poking me with needles and monitoring the baby. Daniel mostly sat in the room on his tablet while I was cold and distant towards him, still upset. Finally, labor progressed and the baby started moving down. I was nearing the point where I needed to push. Daniel put his tablet away and tried to be more supportive. At that moment, I welcomed any support, as I was literally trying to give birth without any pain relief. As the baby began to crown, Daniel looked at the baby's head, then at the nurse and asked, "When do you do the paternity test?" I stopped mid-push, looked at him, and screamed, "What the hell?" The nurse was silent, looking back and forth between us, and the doctor said, "Sir, we're here to deliver and care for the baby. If you have personal issues, sort them out later. Right now, our focus is on the baby and Mum. This is not the place for such questions." I immediately started crying, hysterically, babbling that it wasn't like that, explaining that it was his baby, and his mum was just crazy. I felt mortified, knowing that the nurses and doctor might now think there was a question about the baby's paternity, and I couldn't properly explain the situation to them. I felt judged and robbed of a beautiful moment. I was completely overwhelmed with emotion, and what should have been a brief moment between crowning and the baby's birth felt like an eternity. Because of my distress, I was furious with Daniel. I demanded to know how he could do this to me, how he could question the paternity in front of the doctor and nurses when he knew she was his daughter and that it was my idea to do the tests in the first place. After the baby was born, I held her close. She was perfect, but I was so distraught that I couldn't even look at Daniel. I regret to admit it, but I wouldn't let him hold her. I was simply too angry. He left the room, and when he returned about an hour later, he said his mom wanted photos of the baby and took out his phone. I slapped it out of his hand. He got upset and left. My sister had to come and pick us up from the hospital and take us home 2 days later. As required in my state, we had to bring the baby back for tests and a checkup to ensure she was maintaining weight and showing no signs of neglect. We took her in for the checkup and then went to a clinic to do the paternity test on the same day. The following days at home were unbearable. I couldn't even look at Daniel, and he avoided being around me or the baby. He barely acknowledged our newborn and practically ignored our older daughter. We had an argument because I was trying to breastfeed the baby, and our older daughter was crying because her favorite cartoon wasn't working. I broke down in tears from being overwhelmed. Daniel looked at our daughter and said, "Mommy didn't pay the streaming bill because she's upset with Grandma." I yelled at him to stop saying things like that to a child. He claimed he thought I hadn't paid it because his mum uses our account at her house. In reality, I had simply forgotten to pay it. It had nothing to do with that. Over the next few days, he made several remarks to our daughter, like Daddy's going to see Grandma. You can't come because Mommy dislikes Grandma. Then he would leave me with a crying 2-year-old and a newborn. I won't lie. I know my hormones are all over the place and this is a difficult time, but I seriously considered telling him I wanted a divorce right then and there. He left, and I tried my best to cool down, but I couldn't. I convinced myself that I wanted a divorce because of his behavior. Am I losing my mind? Is this enough to seriously consider leaving him? 3 days later, we received the paternity test results. For anyone who doubted me, they can join my mother-in-law in her delusions. Hez, the father. Daniel cried and told me he never doubted it and knew he was the dad. I told him we would do a second test on our older daughter, and I started packing our things to move in with my sister. He sobbed and said he didn't need one for our older daughter. I insisted we take one as proof for court when my case is heard. I told him I had never been unfaithful to anyone in my life, including him, and how much it hurt me that he made the nurses and doctors think he doubted our daughter. He tried to apologize and embrace me, but I pushed him away and told him to leave while I packed my older daughter. My baby and I are now staying at my sister's house. Daniel has said he refuses to take the second paternity test for our older daughter and plans to have his mom write a long apology letter to me. He wants me to come home, but I can't even look at him the same way. It feels like all the love I had for him has been ripped away, and I feel nothing but anger towards him. I'm doing my best to take care of our daughters, but he won't stop calling me. I told him he could see the girls whenever he wanted, but his mother was off limits and couldn't be around them at all. I need some time to process my emotions, but isn't this enough to consider a divorce? I don't want to go through with it, but I can't even look at him the same way, and I don't know how I could ever move past this. Update. My ex-husband and I have been officially divorced for almost 2 years. Our marriage fell apart after our second daughter was born because his family has an unhealthy fixation on having boys and insinuated that I had been unfaithful because we had daughters. They made it clear that girls were less desirable, and he took their side after they verbally and physically attacked me. That's putting it lightly, but that's the essence of it. He's been with his new girlfriend for about 6 months and only sees our daughters sporadically. After the divorce, I reconnected with a longtime friend from college. He admitted that he had always had feelings for me, but we were always involved with other people, so the timing never worked out. Fast forward, and we've been dating for 1.5 years and engaged for 4 months. He proposed on our anniversary. He's known my girls their whole lives, and it's been a long time since I've been this happy. I am 4 months pregnant, and we just found out that we are having a baby boy. I haven't told my ex-husband yet. I figured he'd notice when I'm visibly pregnant. We will start telling the girls in the next couple of weeks. I know I have to address this situation with my ex. He's bound to ask if we are having a girl or a boy, and I'm unprepared for his reaction to the news that it's a boy. I expect a negative response. I'm unsure whether it's better to announce that we are having a boy now or wait until after he's born. My sister suggests not revealing the gender and saying we're waiting until the birth for a surprise, but all my mum friends recommend announcing it now, so he has some time to process his feelings about our daughter's new sibling. Ex-husband's update, full transparency. I messed up big time. 2.5 years ago, my ex-wife and I welcomed our second daughter into the world. My mum planted doubts in my mind about the paternity of my daughter shortly before her birth. In my family, only boys had been born for generations. I thought my parents and my now ex-wife got along well, but everything fell apart when we were expecting our second daughter. My wife told me that my mum had been insinuating that she cheated for a long time and making nasty comments when I wasn't around. She didn't tell me because she thought I'd side with my mum. In hindsight, she was right. I let my mum influence me, and it destroyed my relationship. I went through a terrible period where I wasn't being a good father. Every time I saw my girls, I found reasons to doubt they were mine. After a heated argument between my wife and my mum, I went to stay with my parents. I know it was a monumental mistake, and it ultimately ended my marriage. My wife insisted on a paternity test to prove the truth, and I just knew then there was no way she had cheated. I begged her not to do the tests, but she was determined. After the test, she told me she couldn't look at me the same way after I sided with my mum, and she didn't love me the same way anymore. I spiraled downward and refused to accept the reality of the situation. When my ex-wife demanded a divorce, I was furious and said if she despised me that much, I'd relinquish my rights to the kids and let her be a single mom. I know that was a mistake. We finalized the divorce 4 weeks later, and it's been 5 years since then. I see my girls every weekend and pick up the oldest from daycare 4 days a week. Things have gotten better, and I feel like we have a solid co-parenting arrangement. But there's always this emotional barrier she keeps up around me. My ex-wife is now engaged to the man she's been dating for a year, and I've been in an on-and-off relationship with my new girlfriend for roughly 8 weeks. Recently, I found out that my ex-wife is pregnant. I asked her if she knew the gender, and she responded, "Yes, it's a boy. Consider this ripping the band-aid off. If you need time to process, I understand." She said it without any emotion, then walked inside with our daughters and shut the door. I feel like I'm living in a nightmare where someone else is playing house with my family and I'm just an outsider. My girlfriend has been talking about marriage and children, but I'm nowhere near ready to consider that with her. I'm starting to feel like I want my old life back. Last night, I got very drunk and tried to call my ex-wife, but she didn't answer. I'm relieved she didn't because I just don't know how to move forward. I have to act like I'm okay with this, but I don't even know how to interact with her without pouring out my heart and desires. Edit. One cut ties with my mum 9 weeks ago and was brutally honest when I did it. She knows that I regret ever listening to her nonsense, and she's no longer part of my life. It was her or my kids, and I chose my kids. Some of you act like I abandoned, and my daughters, I am still very much involved in their lives. Edit 2. I am considering therapy, but some of you make it seem like seeing a therapist will magically make me stop loving her. Signing off for a while because some of you are being incredibly harsh. Thanks.